and start. So I'll start by welcoming you guys. Thank you for being here, and I'm sure we will all be friends at the end of this presentation. So welcome. My name's Viridiana Vazquez. You can call me Viri, short and simple. I'm a student at Palo Alto University. I'm pursuing a master's in counseling. I'm also on my way to get licensure for to become a marriage and family therapist. So that's definitely a goal for me. And as of right now, I am actually working with children. I am at a site, it's a school district. And so for the most part, I see a lot of like elementary age children. I do have a few middle school and high school and some adults. Given that COVID is a thing, we actually are offering services to everybody in the household. So that's how I'm actually able to work with adults when working at a school district, which has been really fun. But aside from that, I just wanted to check in with you guys and see how many of you guys actually work with children. And if you could just type what age group or like the specific age that you guys work with. Okay. Oh, okay, cool, cool. You guys have some teenagers in here. So that's fun. Unfortunately, I have to give you a disclaimer that the presentation is mostly from like I would say like 2 to 13, but it's gonna apply throughout, and I hope that you can see that. Okay, awesome, awesome. And also, I think there will be a lot of good information in how we can also tell how the phobias maybe became a mental health disorder for adults. So I'm just hoping you guys find this very informative as I have. Okay, let's move on. So what interests me into this was that I was actually noticing that 90% of the children I was working with were experiencing anxieties. And of course, they were all related to COVID. And at first, I was like, okay, well, we can definitely work on some coping skills. We'll get through this. This was my thing. I was like, we're gonna help them out, and we're gonna make everybody better. But I did come across one little client that I have who, in amongst all the anxiety that he was experiencing, COVID related, there was a phobia that he was actually also experiencing, and he was actually experiencing this phobia 2 years prior. And so because the anxiety of COVID was kind of more in the front end of it, things where like mom was noticing more of that anxiety is where we kind of miss, and I would say we, because it didn't come to me until maybe like the fifth session where I started realizing that there was a phobia present, and I wanted to make sure. So, I said, okay, how can I detect and what assessments can I use? So basically, that's what I'm here to present, like more of my journey and how I went about, what I learned through it. Also, there'll be a lot of refreshers here because, we are professionals and know a lot of mental health, cognitive development that are happening within children. So I hope you find this also as a refresher, a reminder of things. So back to this interest that I got into, was like, okay, well, there's a lot of anxiety, but this is pattern um of a fear. And I'll go ahead and explain to you guys as I'm going to share my case with you. So this is Ryan, pseudo name. Ryan is 10 years old, male. That's an actual age and gender for him. So he's 10. I want to say he's, fifth grade. And so there's no pre-existing diagnosis, and he was actually referred by mom. Um, when I did the intake with mom's concerns were about the separation anxiety that he was showing. He was actually very anxious about her leaving home, because I know if we could all remember that when COVID first started, everybody was just like quarantining, nobody was going to work. And so mom was actually staying home. I think she said she was home for about a month. And so Ryan was having a really hard time seeing her go back to work. And so the way where he started becoming or showing the anxiety was that he would call her all day when she went back to work, or like send her a text. So all these things were happening for Ryan, and mom was actually um, very concerned, because she wanted to help him alleviate these anxieties, and so that he didn't stay stuck, um, like experiencing them. So we I did that intake, and I said, well, what would be some of the goals? And of course, some of our goals were coping skills for Ryan. And so while I was doing my intake with Ryan, to my surprise, he was actually very open. We talk about like building the rapport at the very beginning of each of our relationships with the clients, but this little boy was very, very open, and he was not afraid to share things with me. So I'm really grateful for that, because he was actually able to share the phobia with me at our fifth session, which typically with my other clients, it doesn't go that fast. But yeah, so some of the worries is what we went in calling it, was that Ryan was just afraid of going into a building and like the building just collapsing on him. Like, he also had this worry that if he went outside and there'll be a dog walking by, that the dog would bite him. So there was like a lot of worries that he was having. And so my first approach to this was like, okay, let's do some CBT, right? Like, let's fact check them, let's debunk these anxieties. So what we were working on that was just the debunking, right? And come the fifth session, he shared a very special memory with me, which was of his birthday celebration 2 years back. So it was about his eighth birthday. And he said they actually had gone to the lake, and that he was very excited because he loves hanging with family, just things like that. Um, but he actually realized that when it was time to go in the water, he did not like it. And so he started telling like, hey, I didn't like the way the rocks felt on my feet. I didn't, I started thinking that the fishes were going to eat at my skin, and the seaweed was going to come, and even the sharks were going to get too close to me. So there was like all these worries that he started like experiencing in that moment of being in the lake. So we went ahead and we talked it out, because I also like to bring a lot of awareness to emotions and awareness to your body for the children, of what's happening for you in that moment. So I walked him through that. And so I told him like, just think about that moment. Sorry guys, that's my dog. Um, so I told him, just walk me through that moment. And okay, I'm gonna mute so I could tell my dog. I'm sorry. Okay. And so he realized that he was having these like, he called it like a frozen moment, right? Because he started to like have all these thoughts, and they were coming very fast at him. And so he's like, I just kind of stood there and then like started realizing these things, right? Like fishes and eating at me, or like how it felt so weird on my feet. And so I asked him like, what did it feel like in your body, right? Like, was it hot? Was it tingly? Like anything you noticed? And he did say that he noticed that like there was like something happening in his tummy where he just did not feel good. And I was like, okay, great. What other things were happening for you at that very moment? And he's like, I really can't remember, right? So what happened next? So he does remember going to mom and asking mom that, or just sharing that experience. Like, I didn't like it, like the rocks on my feet, it's kind of gross. So mom really thought about how can we move forward so that, we still have some good times here? And so they ended up giving him like water shoes so that he was able to go in. And he did try them on, but he admitted to me that he didn't end up going back in the water. He was just at the very edge so that he could still see the people inside the water. But he didn't like it. So we're just kind of talking through that, and I was like, okay, that's thank you for sharing that with me, right? So then we started trying to do what we did with the other fears, debunking, fact checking, well, fishes don't eat skin. You could wear your shoes when you go in there, or sharks can't get too close to the shore, which, that's not true anymore. But, things like that so that it could bring some ease to him. But it always come back up. It would be like maybe one session he wouldn't talk about it, but the next would be like, you know what? Today I was in like the shower and I closed my eyes and I thought there was going to be a shark in my tub. And so then I started realizing that there was a thing with maybe water that he was experiencing. And so I wanted to look into this so that I could better help him, right? But I also wanted to establish that. Is it a phobia? So let me move on. And I want to give us a little break. And I want to ask your personal opinion. What do you think is a normal fear? If you can just either unmute yourself or type it, I'd love to know what you guys think is a normal fear. Yeah, death. Dark. Yeah.
Would heights be a normal fear?
Yeah. Animals. Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Brandy. Night. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, people. Right. So I'll go ahead and share what I did find throughout my research was that one of the most common ones were fear of the dark. Heights was a good one too. I'm trying to find my little note here that I wrote all of them down. The animals, loud noises, bugs for children is the thing. Vaccinations. So we pretty much got all of them, right? And so these are more like normal fears, but also we have to consider what is the reaction to that fear? How we handle that fear is also a consequence of just being a fear, or can it become something more serious, like a phobia? And so here I just have the DSM-5 description of specific phobia. I definitely do not recommend that we diagnose our children, our clients with this disorder. I'm actually, as I hope that we all share the same opinion that, giving a child a diagnosis can be very, stigmatizing for them. And so just wanted to just put this here so that we can get a sense of like the symptoms that the DSM-5 gives us. So here it says, specific phobia is a marked fear or anxiety about a specific object or situation. And then it has like this little side note, which I found very interesting, and I would love to hear you guys' opinion. It says, in children, the fear or anxiety may be expressed by crying, tantrums, freezing, or clinging. I'm just going to give that a moment because after I read that, I thought to myself, like, that's my children on a daily basis. Like, I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that would be an actual telling symptom for a child? Oh, am I frozen? Okay, no, sorry. Right. So then the other symptoms are immediate intense fear or anxiety, active avoidance of object or situations. Fear or anxiety is out of proportion to the actual threat. Fear, anxiety, and avoidance impairs the child socially or in their daily functioning. And then, of course, my favorite one is lasting more than 6 months. And it cannot be related to another mental disorder. And there's also the subtypes here, which I thought were very helpful so that I could make my own decision to like, so I can guide me into like what it could be for my own client. So there's blood injection injury, natural environment, situational, and animal. So just something that we can keep in mind. So here I have the Pagod's cognitive development stages, and it's more of a refresher for us. So I'm gonna play the video, and I'm hoping that my audio works. So bear with me, please. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing because I'm gonna switch. Okay. Okay. That one. And if you guys can tell me if you could hear it, it would be greatly appreciated. Here you go. Share sound. Okay, you can see that. Please tell me if you can hear it.
Piaget's theory argues that we have to conquer 4 stages of cognitive development. First, the sensory motor stage.
Sounds good.
Second, the pre-operational stage. Third, the concrete operational stage. And fourth, the formal operational stage. Only once we have gone through all the stages, at what age can vary, we are able to reach full human intelligence. 1. The sensory motor stage, ages birth to 2. In the sensory motor stage, we develop through experiences and movement our 5 senses. Our brain wants to see, hear, smell, taste and touch as much as possible. First, we start with simple reflexes, and soon after we develop our first habits. From 4 months old, we become aware of things beyond our own body, and then as we get older, we learn to do things intentionally. A key milestone is the development of working memory, or in Piaget terms, our realization of object permanence. Before that, our mum can show and then hide a teddy, and we would think it's gone. After, we understand that objects continue to exist, even when we can't see them. We start becoming curious about everything. We want to smell flowers, taste food, listen to sounds, and talk to strangers. To explore more, we move. We learn to sit, crawl, stand, walk, and even to run. This increased physical mobility consequently leads to increased cognitive development. But we remain egocentric, meaning we can perceive the world only from our own point of view. 2. The pre-operational stage, ages 2 to 7. Our thinking is mainly categorized through symbolic functions and intuitive thoughts. We have lots of fantasies and believe objects are alive. As we are not able to apply specific cognitive operations, Piaget calls this stage pre-operational. We learn to speak and understand that words, images, and gestures are symbols for something else. When we draw our family, we are not concerned about drawing each person to scale, but rather with their symbolic meanings. We love to play pretend, which allows us to experience something new and learn a lot. At around age 4, most of us become very curious and ask many questions. We want to know everything. We can call it the birth of primitive reasoning. Piaget calls it the intuitive age, because while we realize that we have a vast amount of knowledge, we have no idea how we acquired it. Our thinking in this stage is still pretty egocentric. We think others see the world like we do, and still don't understand that they see it differently. 3. The concrete operational stage, ages 7 to 11. We finally discover logic, and we develop concrete cognitive operations, such as sorting objects in a certain order. One example of this is inductive reasoning, which means that if we see someone eating a cookie, we can draw a conclusion and then make a generalization. And we now get the concept of conservation. We understand that if we pour orange juice from a normal glass to a taller one, the amount stays the same. Our younger sister will pick the taller glass, thinking she gets more. By the same logic, we only now can understand that if 3 plus 5 equals 8, then 8 minus 3 must equal 5. Our brain learns to rearrange our thoughts, to classify and build concrete operational mental structures. For example, we now know that we can reverse an action by doing the opposite. Excited by our new mental abilities, we apply them in conversations, activities, when we learn to write, and in school. As a result, we get to know ourselves better. We begin to understand that our thoughts and feelings are unique and not necessarily those of others. That means that we learn to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. 4. The formal operational stage, age 12 plus. Once we become teenagers, we become formally operational. We now have the ability to think more rationally about abstract concepts and hypothetical events. Our advanced cognitive abilities allow us to understand abstract concepts such as success and failure, love and hate. We form a deeper understanding of our own identity and our morality. We now also think that we understand why people behave the way they behave, and as a result, can become more compassionate. Our brain can now do deductive reasoning, which means we can compare two statements and reach a logical generalization. Our new mental skills allow us to plan our life systematically and prioritize, and we can make assumptions about events that have no necessary relation to reality. We can now also philosophize and just think about thinking itself. Our new sense for our identity now also creates egocentric thoughts, and some start to see an imaginary audience watching them all the time. Piaget believed in lifelong learning, but insisted that the formal operational stage is the final stage of our cognitive development. Jean Piaget's first interests were animals, and he published his first scientific paper on albino sparrows in 1907.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
In 1920,
Okay. So that was just a refresher. This kind of just reminded me of where or what stage children are in cognitively, like how are they processing life? How are they seeing the world, right? And like the situations that they're in. So that was what I was, my point I was trying to make through that. So now I'm going to share with you guys again, my slides. So through my research, I, was looking for some data to give me maybe some numbers or an idea of how many children were experiencing anxiety, but then I'll go back and relate it back to DSM-5 and diagnosing and like the stigma. So I'm kind of glad that I didn't find any data on that. But what I did find was a really interesting article. It was a research survey that the World Health Organization along with the World Mental Health Survey put together. It was actually a retrospective analysis where they surveyed, let me see, I have the number here. If I go back, 123,628 participants from 25 countries. So what they did was give them the survey, and some of the questions were related back to their childhood. If they could remember what were they experiencing at certain age. 6% of these respondents reported experiencing a specific phobia. So 56% of them reported at least one specific phobia, and 25% of them reported two, and so on. Here's the information. And there was also discovered that the onset of the phobias was between the age 8 and 13. So that tells me that, this is probably the most important time to kind of have that awareness about what are some of the symptoms, how we can detect it, and some assessments that can actually help us get to that detection, and so that we can work on a treatment that can help our clients. So here are some of the symptoms. Again, through my research, I found Nicole Capriola, and she's actually a researcher who focuses her research on children and adolescents experiencing various anxieties. So she did, explain to us that internal symptoms that children are experiencing are dizziness, elevated heart rate, upset stomach, and feeling of choking. And so if I can relate this back to Ryan's case, the upset stomach was a thing for him that he did name during our session. And he did feel like this frozen moment within him, which he did not tell me about, but I could only assume that it could be related to like elevated heart rate, right? Because you're kind of like in a moment of not only are you discovering, but also you're really just trying to take that moment in. And so and I also just want to mention that internal symptoms can be very hard to discover. One, not only as a clinician, but myself as a parent, it's very hard for me to know, like, what are my children experiencing internally, unless I probe or like ask the questions, right? How does that feel for you? Where are you feeling it in your body? I'm so big on that. I'm so big on what does it feel like in when that's happening? Are you feeling hot, tingly? So those are some of the questions that I ask so that I can get an idea of what the child is experiencing internally. And so some of the external symptoms that Nicole brought up was that the temperaments change. So also, like, it's connected to maybe some defiant behavior where we may see it as defiant, but the child is actually just trying to avoid the situation. And so because they're trying to like avoid it so hard and they don't have the words to express that fear, from the outsider, it looks like they're just being defiant, or like they just want to pick a fight with you. So that was something that to me could also seem kind of relatable to anything. It could be like a situation at home. And so some of these symptoms can be very general, right? Like nervousness. Are you nervous because you're shy? Are you frustrated because you can't use the scissors? Like, these are some symptoms that, sure, we can see and we can kind of call attention to, but we would also want to have that assessment, right? Like, what can we do to actually feel comfortable to continue to explore that specific phobia, or even what we think that might be there. So this is my break. I am congratulating everybody because we've made it through. We made it through just like a refresher, right? So I hope you either learn something, I hope, and also if not, that it's a reminder of like the things that sometimes we're just so busy that become like forgotten. So there you go, you're a great clinician. So I am now moving on to assessment, but before I move on to assessment, I just want to quickly see if anybody had a question prior to like symptoms and the detection. I could take a minute or two to just talk that out. Okay, so I'll move forward and we'll just save that for the end. So these are some of the assessments that I came across and found very useful. This site that I'm going to share with you guys, it has so many resources. I'm going to stop sharing so I could take you to the website. So Is this? Yeah, that's the one. Okay. Let me go back to sharing. Okay, so this one is the Revised Children Anxiety and Depression Scale, and it has subscales too. If you can see here, they have self-reported scales, which I found to be very reliable, very telling as well, because what better way than to hear it personally from the person experiencing these things, right? And then even the most exciting thing here is that there's a parent version too, right? Because also through the research that I was looking into was that these children who were experiencing some sort of anxiety was because it was actually a thing that the parents were experiencing. So if a parent was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, there was a higher chance that the child was also experiencing some sort of anxiety. So I really think that that could be helpful in that we can incorporate the parents into these assessments and also give us an explanation, kind of like, okay, I could see how that tracks back. And so that you have one for separation anxiety, social phobia, generalized anxiety, sorry. I was gonna choose one. Oh, but I don't think, okay. I was gonna choose one just so that we can kind of look at it very quickly. I'll do the separation anxiety here. Oh. Okay, so this one here, there's 7 questions and it goes from never, sometimes, often, always. So you just kind of circle them, right? And there are no right or wrong answers. So I would encourage the child to, just know that there's no right or wrong. This is just how you're feeling. This other one is an online one, and it actually generates the results for you here. So you have them just, and it says, copy results. And so I really found this one to be helpful in that I could just share the link with the parent and they could do it, or I can do it with them over telehealth, and also just share them with them. So let me see if I can go back. There's another one to here. This one, there's a lot of different resources for assessments here, which I thought was pretty neat, right? Because sure, I'm talking about phobias and anxieties, but you have other assessments here, right? You have an ADHD, you have depression, milestones. And so I really thought that this was great because we kind of have this resource, and this one, actually, the online one, came from this site. So I just wanted to share that with you guys because I thought that was really neat. And while I was going through this process of helping my client, I would have wished I had these. So I will share the links with you guys. Let me see if I can. Okay, let me see what Okay, so there are some of the links, and I just was wondering if you guys actually had any assessments that you actually really like to use with your clients, because what better way than to share our resources. So if you have any and you want to type them down or share a link, I'd welcome that, because we all would benefit from it. Or if you could just tell me one that you is like your go-to. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit of the assessments that I used with this particular client. I used a fear survey schedule for children too. Let me get it. So how we went about that was that I like became very curious, right? Like I started realizing that there was more to that. So here, before I move on, yeah, you're welcome. So thank you, Nicola, thank you. So we're sharing links here, which is really great. I'm all about the help. So right, back to the assessments I used for Ryan here. I became curious and I really was second guessing myself. I was really thinking, am I making this up? Is he really experiencing a phobia, or is it just part of the COVID anxiety? Like, right? Like I was very I don't know, second guessing my abilities to kind of just what was seen, like was it real, like am I really seeing a phobia here? And so this scale has 78 questions. And so I didn't do this assessment in one session. We actually had about 3 sessions where, you know, we did a little bit and then we went back and we did the rest and stuff like that. And so it turned out that Ryan had 44 questions out of the 78 where he marked moderate, quite a bit, and extreme. And just so you guys can get an idea of what was like some of the questions that were on this assessment. Fear of being alone, he put extremely. Our country being invaded, that one he put extremely as well. Having to go to school, like extreme. He was very like, what is beyond extreme? So that was a big one for him. Ghost or spooky things, that was moderate for him. And let's see, the sharks was a big one for him as well. And so what I was trying to do here was to notice if there was a pattern of what was like the most, like the fear, right? Like, what is it, a situational? Is it an environmental? Is it an animal, right? And so for me, I came to the conclusion that it was more an environmental thing for him, because of the water. He wasn't afraid to take showers, right? It was just more of like the setting, like the water reminded him of the setting, which was the lake. And also we talked a lot about like the ocean. So it was, to me, it became an environmental thing. And so that's how I feel like the FSSC helped me just really confirm for me that what he was experiencing was related to a phobia.
Hey, Vidi.
Oh yeah.
Was that assessment designed just for children, or was it for children and teens?
So this one is, let me see, this one's for children, but there is one that is children and adolescents. So yeah.
Thank you.
Let me put my earphones back on, guys. I realize I don't have my earphones on. Okay. Right. Okay. So thank you for that, Carly. So we have the next one, which is more of a exposure type of assessment. It's called the behavior avoidance test. And you would kind of do it gradually right? You gradually like bring the child to the situation or the object, and you start noticing how their reaction is. And also you ask them, you put a scale of like 0 to 8, 0 to 10, and ask them, how uncomfortable are you here with 0, 8, 10? And so that this exposure was very telling to me. And of course, because of COVID, we weren't able to be like face to face or, go out to the lake or anything, but we did do like a visualize a test, like where you kind of visualize being at the lake. And so I would like take him there. Oh, just remember that time when you were at the lake. How far can you go in? And what number is it for you? How uncomfortable are you? So we did a visualization test for him. And it turned out that when he was actually even at the shore where water was not really touching him, he was like at a 7. He was uncomfortable. Just the thought that he was going to take another step made him uncomfortable. So this one here is, to me, has a lot of really good reliability in that it tells you just straight from the source, right? The source is letting you know, this is how I'm feeling. But not only that, you're actually able to notice the symptoms, the external symptoms, when they're being exposed to this phobia. And so this is where, just knowing some of these symptoms can really help out when they're being exposed to that phobia. And so before I close it off, I wanted to talk about treatment. I mean, I know that it's not really part of my presentation, but if there was anything, I kind of just wanted to hear from you guys, treatment wise, considering this case, what would you guys suggest?
I just wanted to chime in and say, if you want to come off mute too, you don't just have to type it into the chat. Feel free.
Thank you, Colleen.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about treatment because it's not part of the presentation, but I really was just curious about how you guys might have handled a situation like this. And so now I could thank you for coming. And if there is any questions you guys have for me, I am more than happy to answer them. Thank you guys for coming. But I'll stick around a minute or two. Yeah, thank you guys for sharing also. I know somebody shared some resources, so thank you for that. And feel free to keep and save the links. So Colleen, did you want me to just stick around for a little bit?
I think we're good if no one else has questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it.
We have
Resources like movies or books.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. I don't have that list with me. Oh, that's such a great question. If I could email it, and maybe Colleen or somebody can email it out. Is that a thing?
Yes, it is a thing. We can definitely share resources. Mhm.
Okay, sounds great. I definitely will put together a list for everyone, and then it'll be sent out soon. So thank you for that question, Miriam. Alrighty, so I'm gonna go, guys, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.